Hello, welcome to the Wildline podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. So today, I'm finally going to do part 2 of the year in review for 2017. I did part 1 about a month ago, and that was focused on the financials of the box office, how much money was made, how much money was lost, and all that jazz. This is going to be specifically about the movies themselves, what was the top 20, and then sort of looking at macro trends within the films themselves to kind of see what genres are doing well, what studios are doing well, and see how we think they're going to do here in 2018. But if you didn't listen to part 1, it will help to give some context here as to what the final conclusion was of that year in review in terms of just talking about the money overall from a macro level. The box office is down. It's not doing fantastic. Broadly speaking, the entire industry has been contracting since about 2002, 2004. And that's mostly due to one main cause. That's the drop in people buying tickets. It's the drop in admissions themselves. Now, movie theaters have found a way to offset those drops in terms of people coming to the movie theater by creating a more luxury experience at the theater. And you'll notice this if you've gone in the last 5 to 10 years. Assigned seating is now a thing. Leather recliners is becoming the norm. Higher end food, alcohol. I think Alamo Drafthouse is one of the pioneers of that. And what's the one? Landmark? Not Landmark. Archlight out in California and Los Angeles is another one that sort of like was the vanguard of making those changes. But essentially the whole point is movie theaters are trying to get more money per customer per visit to offset the drop in admissions. And that's essentially what's been happening over the last 10 years, about maybe even more recent, like 5 years, where they've made a really concerted effort to renovate their theaters and make it feel more luxurious. But the problem is that admissions keep dropping. And last year was just a pretty bad year overall, even with films like Star Wars coming out. So it helps to understand that the business is starting to change pretty dramatically. And we can see that more recently, even in the last week, with the war that has bubbled up between AMC and MoviePass. MoviePass is the monthly subscription service where you pay $10 and you can go to a new movie every day at the movie theater, which makes zero business sense because a single ticket at a movie theater is over $10 now, right? For most people. And so MoviePass is losing money hand over fist to build a massive audience or a customer base that wants to go see movies often but doesn't go that much because it's too expensive, and they offer this solution. And so you have this subscription-based model now fighting with, and very, very much outsiders, right? Like AMC, Regal, Cinemark, Marcus, they want MoviePass to die and go away as soon as possible because they feel like the whole concept of MoviePass and this big change in the whole business model of the box office is moving people towards paying less per ticket. And they want to do the exact opposite. And that's been their strategy for like the last decade, is get people to pay more for their ticket. They have done such a good job of that the current average for a movie ticket, which is about $9. I mean, that's the average, countrywide, including United States and Canada. It seems pretty low to me, but that's what the average is according to the industry. 25 years ago, I did a little research on this. The average movie ticket was half of real income than it is now. So now a person pays double their percentage of income that they did 25 years ago for a movie ticket. So the real price for a movie ticket has doubled, right? And that's including inflation and all this other sort of stuff. So the ticket prices have gone up massively, right? Kind of reminds me of like the cost of college or like the cost of healthcare. It's not that drastic, but it has doubled. People are paying double their percentage of their income than they did 25, 30 years ago. So that's what they wanted, right? That's movie theaters want more money out of people because less people are going. But you know how that ends, right? Like the more you charge people, the less they go. It becomes a tailspin, right? Because they want to charge more and more, and people keep going less and less, so they have to charge even more to make up for the losses and the drop of admissions. And so that's a lot what part one was about. I don't want to go through the whole thing again, but if you're interested in that side of the business, do check out that episode. It's up on SoundCloud and wherever you can find the podcast, which I think is everywhere. So let's get into part 2 here and start talking about the actual films themselves and how they did in 2017. I think the best way to do it, I thought of a lot of different approaches to this episode, and every time I sort of thought about it or actually tried it, I was like, this doesn't sound right. So I'm just going to walk through the top 20, maybe top 30, do some quick hits on these movies, and just sort of see if I can draw some parallels together and sort of weave some broader narratives as to what is happening at the box office over the last year or so. But let's just start out, let's walk through the top 10 and see where we go. So number 1 last year, obviously, was Star Wars. That to the surprise of basically nobody, it was expected to do well over $500 million in the United States. Obviously, The Force Awakens is the biggest movie of all time domestically. It's kind of outrageous how much it made, but not that surprising when you look back to the hype levels that were going on at the end of 2015. It was really special. I've been following the box office for at least 20 years now, and I never saw hype like that, even remotely close to that. And so with the second sequel to The Force Awakens coming out, people thought that it was going to do something similar, and it started out really strong, but it has really faded here in the last few weeks. And I think there's a huge debate going on about why. And I don't necessarily want to get myself in the middle of that. I was very, very reluctant to accept any criticism of The Last Jedi in the first couple of weeks. And there was a ton being lobbed at it. Oh, it's this much less than Force Awakens. Oh, look at the Rotten Tomato audience score. I was like, no. Like, I don't have time for this. There's a whole element of alt-right people who are trying to destroy the Star Wars movies because they have a black man and a woman as the lead. That's just the reality of the situation that's out there. There's a lot of white supremacists who don't like that. And so a lot of those people were pretending to be, or were being trolls online, trying to irritate fans of the series, and the people in the middle like me were just like, just shut up, like I don't want to hear this. But as the third and fourth week rolled around, the drops were coming in, it just didn't seem like it had any of the staying power of The Force Awakens, which was really, let's be honest, a very special run, not only on the front end but also on the back end. Super strong legs all the way through January into February. That was 2015 going into 2016. The Last Jedi just did not have those legs, and just, it's doing okay. It's at 607 now, domestically. Overseas it's about 700, so it's about 1.3 million right now. Now that's a win, right? There's no other way you can, no other way you can spin that. It's a win. And Disney's going to make at least $200-300 million in profit. But the fact that its legs didn't really hold up or hold out suggests that there are some quality issues there and some audience reaction problems. I saw the film. I did not particularly like it that much. I loved The Force Awakens when I first saw it. Saw it 3 times. Looking back on it, I don't even want to rewatch that film. I don't like it that much. Rogue One's a masterpiece. I'm not going to get into that. Absolute masterpiece. Best Star Wars film ever made. It's called good writing, folks. It matters. So Star Wars Last Jedi, really good financial performance. Not a great sort of cultural performance, we'll say. I think audiences were left with a bad taste in their mouth from it. It's not a bad film per se. It's just not a great Star Wars film. It didn't seem that epic. It didn't feel that special. I think it has next to zero rewatchability value. We'll see what happens when it comes on pay TV in about 8 to 9 months on HBO or whatever, Netflix or something like that. Or I suppose it'll be Disney's streaming service if they get it off the ground anytime soon. But you cannot deny its financial health and win, right? Just staggering the amount of money that it's made and the profit that it will make for Disney. But I think it makes me a little bit more worried, and Disney should be worried about the reception to Solo now, and then the 9th episode of Star Wars, the sequel to The Last Jedi. I think there's going to be a little bit more of a muted opening weekend to both of those, just because of the bad taste that was left in people's mouth from The Last Jedi, which, if you looked at the numbers alone, you'd be absolute grand slam home run. But if you talk to people in general, it's sort of definitely a very lackluster response that you'll get, I think. Not many people say, oh, it's the best Star Wars film ever, blah, blah, blah. It's more like, yeah, it was okay. That's everybody that I've talked to who has a fair opinion, I think, who's kind of tries to be objective when they're viewing films and film criticism. The response I've gotten for the most part is like, yeah, whatever, it's fine. But that was number one, and sort of obviously it cast a shadow on everybody on every other film. Coming in at number two is another Disney film, Beauty and the Beast, which did 504, just over $500 million domestically. This one was kind of a surprise. I mean, you just look, the top two films are Disney. Like, we know one of the big stories of this year is how strong Disney is. And as they start to create their own streaming service and take on Netflix in the subscription VOD world, as they call it, SVODs, they have a lot of clout, and they've proven themselves to be able to make these massive, huge blockbusters. Beauty and the Beast kind of feels like a little bit of a bet about a year ago. It's like a live action version of a beloved animated film. It kind of seems kitschy, kind of seems like a gimmick. But when it opened in March, it just crushed, and also had massive staying power as well. I think it opened at 174, which is just, man. If you asked me at the beginning of last year what I thought Beauty and the Beast would open at that March, I would say maybe 60. Top 70. The fact that it pushed another 100 million is just a credit to, I think, Disney's marketing arm, and I think the love of that original film. My guess is that, and I remember when we were doing the episodes for Beauty and the Beast, it skewed very young. I think under 25s absolutely loved it, and it was one of those films where kids could go, teenagers, 20-somethings, and on up, and everybody sort of got something out of it. I don't think the quality was that high. The sort of 3-month, 4-month check-in after it came out, a lot of people were like, yeah, it was fine. Which is kind of a very similar response to The Last Jedi, right? Like, maybe sort of obviously different genres and different types of film, but there was this super hype to go see it, and people went to go see it, and then like the come down from that was sort of like, yeah, it was okay. But I mean, the big news from Beauty and the Beast is that it's going to kick off this whole other channel and medium for Disney, which is the sort of live action remakes of their animated classics, which is going to be cool. I think Lion King is going to be massive. Mulan, Aladdin, those are all sort of in the pipeline, and I think they were all greenlit before. But now they're going to toss a ton of money at them after the response here to Beauty and the Beast in terms of financials. But a huge win, another huge win for Disney. Two $500 million films, unbelievable. And number three brings us to Wonder Woman, and what a surprise! Coming into June when this is coming out, there's a lot of debate back and forth. Wonder Woman got caught in that cultural war between like 4chan trolls and alt-right people and the Me Too movement, and like Wonder Woman was kind of stuck in the middle. I guess it was before Me Too officially took off, but all that stuff was going on over the summer, and it harkened back a little bit to the Ghostbusters debate that was going on. I guess that was summer of 2016, and so it was caught in the middle of that. And because of that, I thought that it might have a little bit of an underwhelming opening and total take at the box office. But I was totally wrong. So it opened at about 103, which when that happened, it was like, okay, that's pretty good. The real surprise here and the big story about Wonder Woman were the legs. It had a 4x multiplier, which is absolutely unheard of for a huge comic book film. Totally unheard of. Just to give you some examples, like Ultron had like a 2.4. Actually, I think it was less than 2.4, maybe 2.3. With those big tentpole movies, they blow up the first couple of weekends, and then they fall off the face of the earth, for the most part. Wonder Woman just kept going and going and going. And you could say, oh, it was kind of a quiet summer. There wasn't a lot else out there like that. But Spider-Man opened like a month later, right? So that's not necessarily true. It just, people really wanted to go see this. They wanted to see it multiple times. And especially among women, young and old, it was like a statement film, right? I feel like they went to go see it to support it on some level and say, not to be sort of trite about it, but yeah, women can be superheroes too. And I think that was a big part of the cultural movement behind this film, and a big reason why it did so well. And if we take just a quick step back and think about the top 3 films, right? Star Wars, Beauty and the Beast, Wonder Woman. What do they all 3 have in common? All 3 have female leads to the film, which I don't know if that's ever happened before, where the top three films for an entire year had female leads, right? So we're noticing that there's just this, not a massive shift, but a very noticeable shift that is happening within our culture. And I think there's a reason why people would say on the far right, Trump supporters, stuff like that, alt-right people, are being so militant in terms of the new feminist wave that is happening this year, is because it is very strong. And that feminist wave does have a really large, powerful voice, and it threatens those people. And that's what creates a lot of the conflict. And Wonder Woman is just like a call to action. And the amount of money that it made sort of goes, kind of humiliates the people that said, oh, there shouldn't be a woman superhero movie, or it shouldn't, she shouldn't get her own movie, or some way to subjugate women, some excuse that people have. Wonder Woman is sort of like a slap in the face against that. And you can't argue with Beauty and the Beast and Star Wars having female leads. Like, it's just there. And it's cool to see, and not even just from a political perspective, but it does change the industry a bit. And Wonder Woman was also, I think, the biggest box office for a female-directed film as well. $412 million. Just fantastic. So there's a lot shifting in the industry in terms of just what is doing well, who are the characters we're seeing on screen, and who's behind the camera. And those are changes that needed to happen decades ago, but they are happening now. And when we say that they're happening, they actually happened 3 or 4 years ago, and these films were greenlit and started to film, and now we're seeing the results of that. So it's kind of interesting that it's coincided with the Me Too movement, which really just took off this summer. It's kind of a weird confluence of sort of movements happening. In any event, let's keep going. So number 4 this year was Guardians of the Galaxy 2, did $389 million domestically. Not a huge surprise to anybody. People love this film. The trailers were fantastic. The use of music in this film series is bar none some of the best, right? They know exactly what pop songs to use and exactly how to use them. It's a really fun film series. I'm not a huge comic book movie fan, but I really like both of these films. There's a sense of lightness to them and buoyancy, and they're fun to go see. And they really play well across the spectrum. Like, they play well with kids, teenagers, young adults, and parents. Like, it's just a film you could just go and take anybody to and just have a really good time. And I think the box office performance of the first one, which was out of the blue, let's not forget that it opened in that August and just blew everything out of the water with a $94 million opening weekend. And coming to this one, it performed pretty much to expectations, which were super, super high. Opened at 146, closing out at 389. You cannot complain about that performance at all. I will say the second one, not as good as the first one. But I think I might be in the minority on that. The audience reaction to Guardians of the Galaxy 2 was very, very positive across the board. And a really big May opening for this year. Guardians of the Galaxy 2 to me fits into this paradigm of summer movie blockbuster. We all knew it was going to do well. It felt massive. The trailers felt big and fun, and it just felt like a huge popcorn movie, and it performed like a huge popcorn movie. And so it was really easy to sort of predict this one. If it had gone below 350 into the 300s, if it failed to break 300, it would have been problems. But it didn't super break out. It didn't go to the 500 million, didn't go to the 400 million. So it was right in line with expectations for a summer blockbuster film. It's kind of refreshing to see something play to the trope, if you will. Number 5, Spider-Man Homecoming. This one opened pretty low in early July. I think it was 117 was the opening. Ended up having a really good multiplier. There's a fear here with Spider-Man. It had a really crappy second weekend drop. I think it was like 60%, something really high. And people were like, oh man, this thing is going to fucking fall off the face of the earth and be lucky to make 250 or whatever. But this one, especially past week 3 and 4, just stuck around. And I think because it was a super quiet August and there was nothing really else coming out in terms of big movies, people just went to go see Spider-Man because it was just like, oh, it's like the 6th Spider-Man movie in the 15 years. If you like Spider-Man and you kind of know what you're going to get, people just showed up to it, and it ended up making $334 million. Really good performance. It bodes well for the Spider-Man series moving forward that they can always sort of count on it to do decently well. Not like the Amazing Spider-Man, which sort of did not do so well, which is why they had to reboot it. So even if you look in the top 5, 3 comic book movies in the top 5, right? So comic book movies are very strong. We're in the 4th wave now of the comic book movie sort of movement, which that's sort of, I've coined that, and that's my theory on it. But the 4th wave being starting with Deadpool, essentially, because there was that really big valley, if you remember in 2015, where Ant-Man came out. It did well, made about 180 domestically, but not a huge blockbuster tentpole movie. It just wasn't. Fantastic Four completely flopped. And I think that was mostly it until Deadpool came out that next spring and really rebooted. I feel like it rebooted the comic book movie genre a bit and added a lot more edge and excitement to it. And I think we see that sort of playing out now. You know, if you look at like Guardians, Wonder Woman, and Spider-Man, none of them are serious films. They're not serious films. You go there, you have fun. Like, I feel like the comic book movie genre got very serious for a while, and we saw the downside to that, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But Batman versus Superman, the DC EU stuff, failed, relatively failed, because it was so serious, and they sort of went in the exact wrong direction of what people wanted out of the comic book movies. And sort of the one that sort of plays counter to all that is Logan, where it was super serious, very successful. We'll talk about it. It's number 11 on the list. But also felt very fresh at the same time. So we'll get to that in a bit. So Spider-Man was number 5 in the year. It, number 6, $327 million for a horror film that cost $25 million to shoot. Or sorry, $35 million to shoot. Maybe 40. It was under 50, that's all I know. Massive surprise. No one really expected it to do this well going into September, especially because we had such that quiet, dead August. People knew that it was going to do quite well, but this level of performance wasn't really imagined. And it's important because it changes the ballgame for horror films. Horror films, going to this year, have been going through a renaissance, especially on the artistic side. I point to It Follows. I point to The Witch, and films like that, where artistically trying very, very new things. And this year is when the horror film sort of arrived in terms of a renaissance financially. Like, these are now, you can make a blockbuster horror film that can break $300 million, which you couldn't do last year or 2 years before that. It's just completely night and day now. And we also had some kind of crossover between the two, like the artistic renaissance and the sort of financial boom. Get Out would be a perfect example of that. It was 16 on this year, did 175, shot for $5 million by Blumhouse Productions Universal. $5 million. Definitely had that artistic sort of like, not straight to DVD, that's not what I mean, but like sort of like almost B-movie-esque feel to it. Kind of what horror fans are all about. They love those movies that are sort of off kilter and crazy. Had that element to it, but it also had this sort of polish that I'm sure Blumhouse made that happen. Like, it's almost like a house style. Like, it has to be super succinct, well cut, concise, and just polished, even at a $5 million budget. And so you match like this artistic sort of openness and experimentation in terms of the story and the characters and what they were saying with this sort of polish and glean of a major release. And it was like the perfect mixture, and really was the crossover between this artistic renaissance and horror, which Blumhouse has helped without a doubt. and this sort of financial boom that is happening with horror 2, and It was sort of the next step forward on the financial side. I don't think It was an amazing film. I didn't like it that much, and I'm a huge horror fan. I thought it was kind of boring and definitely underwhelming, but that I'm super in the minority in that. Most people loved it, had a really good time, really fun to see in the big screen. I will say that. But its financial performance puts it in another class and really does change how studios are going to approach horror films probably for the next 3 or 4 years. And I think we're going to see a lot more horror films with bigger budgets. I just can't believe that it was shot for so little, right? It looked really good too. Now we're going to see horror films get greenlit with like 50, 60, 80, maybe even $100 million budgets going forward, I feel like. And that was rated R, hard R at that. It's that performance of a hard R film is just really great. It's super surprising. Did not expect that was going to happen. Number 7, still going, Jumanji did 325. I guess that was for the total. Let's see what it did technically. Well, I guess it did. It's 18th if you look at it just calendar gross, how much it did in last year, like each day of last year, it did 169. Total so far right now is 325, right? What a surprise. I don't even know what to say about Jumanji. Going into it, I saw the trailer. I was like, this looks like it's well done. It's a known IP. It's going to nostalgia for the 90s, which is huge now, of course. Did I think it was going to do over $300 million? Absolutely not. I was thinking like 150 would be a good performance for it. Really strange. Almost played off the fact that Star Wars dropped off in later weeks. And it appears that like they, instead of going to Star Wars, they went to Jumanji, which is so weird. But very very well received by the audiences. I guess it's family friendly. I don't know how I guess it's PG. But a lot of families went. It's just it's a strange performance for that film. Not so much that it was unexpected. It's just that you would think that if people were excited to see Jumanji, they'd go out in the first week or two. And they sort of did. But the audience really showed up about 3 weeks in, and the drops have been super low since its third week on. That I can't wrap my head around. I can't figure out. And the same thing with The Last Showman is a similar situation where nobody showed up in the first couple of weeks, and the third week, out of the blue, audiences just started to show up for it. The drops for Last Showman were like 10% each weekend. It's absolutely outrageous. Jumanji, I just don't know. I don't know why people are so keen to go see that in early January. It's not like there wasn't others. There's a lot of stuff in the movie theater to go see. Like, why are they choosing Jumanji? Who knows? I have no idea. But it might be a trend of something bigger, and I can't figure out what that is. Like adventure films, maybe. Like, it's a big win for Sony Pictures, by the way. It was a really tough 4 or 5 years. Well, ever since the hack, whenever that was, 4 years ago. 3 years ago, technically. It's a big win for Sony. I just can't tell if there's any pattern there. Maybe it's just a weird one-off holiday abnormal movie, which happens every so often, where it just clicks with people and they're bored in January and it's cold outside, so I'm just going to go see something fun like Jumanji. Who knows? But that was 18 technically, if you're looking at how much it made in 2017. But if you look at the movies that were released in 2017, look at their totals, it was actually a little bit higher than that. What would it be, actually? Now I'm trying to find it on lists. Okay, let's just move on. Jumanji's weird. I don't understand it. I'm never going to understand why it's doing so well. Looking at calendar grosses for 2017, let's keep this going. Number 7 was Thor Ragnarok. Totally makes sense. Really fun film. Again, fourth wave comic book movies are fun. If they're fun, people will go see them. If they're not, Justice League, they won't. It's simple as that. Really vibrant, colorful film. Did 311 in 2017. Number 8, Despicable Me 3 from Universal, did 264. I don't really have a lot to say about Despicable Me 3. It did very well. Compared to the movies in the series, it did okay. These things just print money, and they're not really that expensive. Most of the money for that, I feel, comes from marketing. And Despicable Me 3 did okay. It just didn't reach the height of the other movies in the series. And so Universal, but it's still going to make probably at least $200 million of profit once you add on the global grosses and all the back end stuff and home video. I think it's going to do fine. That was number 8 for 2017. Number 9 was Logan. Talked about that a little bit. $226 million. Kind of plays against what I stated before. Fourth wave comic book movies being really fun and vibrant and interesting and colorful. Logan was just like a really good drama. It was a really good adult drama sort of masquerading as a comic book movie. And I sort of see Deadpool and Logan as the two sort of paradigms moving forward. It's like you can either do the fun, ironic parody type stuff with Deadpool, or you can get super serious and make a really good drama that just happens to take place with comic book characters. I feel like those are the two big paths forward. We'll see how, obviously, Avengers Infinity War does in this new year. It's going to do fantastic, but I just feel like the strength of the genre are in those two paths, and we saw that. Wonder Woman is sort of an interesting one, too. It's like, was very fun, kind of had some elements of Logan, but definitely felt like a more comic-y comic book movie, if you will. I think that was just one of those statement films where people really wanted to support it, and that's why it did so well. But we'll see where the comic movie genre goes. It's a big year for comic book movies. I had always thought that, and this is post Deadpool, because before Deadpool, I thought that comic book movie genre was starting to fade a bit because Ant-Man didn't pop off massively. Fantastic Four was a huge flop. I thought going into Deadpool, it's like, oh my God, it's opening in February. They've never done that before. What's going to happen? It's not going to do very well. That could hurt the genre. Obviously, the exact opposite happened. So post Deadpool, which changed everything. I feel like Infinity War, the new Avengers film, Part 1, will sort of be a harbinger for things to come over the next 3 to 4 years. Black Panther also coming out in February in the Deadpool Valentine's Day slot. If that pops off, like tracking suggests that it's going to make over $100 million opening weekend, who would have thought 5 years ago that a Black Panther movie opening up in February would break the $100 million mark for opening weekend? I mean, it was just sort of unthinkable. But things change so fast in this industry. And so, speaking of that, if things can go up, they can go down just as quickly. So the comic book movie genre is so incredibly strong right now. You know, out of the top 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 movies are comic book movies. We wouldn't, I don't know if we've ever even seen that before, or anything close to that. So it's a super strong genre, but at some point it's gonna either have to change like it normally does. And I've stated it's gone through 4 different waves. Either needs to be a 5th wave that comes and changes it once again, or it will start to fade. And I kind of wonder how these new comic movies are going to do in the long run, especially with their multipliers. Just the one thing that we saw with Ultron and Civil War, which I think is essentially Avengers 3, was those multipliers were terrible. They did massive opening weekends, but collapsed because the audience is just sort of getting smaller and smaller. Like, general audiences don't want to go see a comic book movie because there's 16 other movies you have to see to get the backstory, right? So I think as they get closer to the fruition of the Avengers series, the genre will have to change again, or it's going to start to fade a bit, I feel like. But right now, it's never been stronger. Number 9 was Logan. Number 10 was Fate of the Furious. What an awful movie. I caught this the other day. Really underperformed the last one. It looks like the newest one, they're going to do a spin-off with The Rock as one of the leads. And the new Fast and the Furious, I got to see when it is scheduled for. The spin-off is coming out this July. Fast and the Furious 9 is scheduled for 2020. And Fast and the Furious 10 is for 21. You know, I don't know. With a movie that terrible, it just sucks that there's so many of them. I mean, they're nearly unwatchable, but they're brainless action movies at this point, right? So that's what people want. They want something stupid. They want to suspend their belief. Fine. That's great. But they're just like, if you want to criticize mainstream blockbuster movies, like Fate of the Furious is like the bullseye of that. It's just so dumb, really poorly put together, awful writing. It kind of reminds me of what Transformers was a few years ago. It has that feel to it. But financially, it's still doing decently well. Now, not anywhere near the last one, saying goodbye to Paul Walker, but it's still making cash, right? Number 11 this year was Justice League, back to the comic book movies. Huge flop. This should have opened well over at least $200 million was what they expected when they greenlit this film. I don't know, it was 5-6 years ago. DCEU is on its last leg, right? They need to keep rebooting it, or you can't have disasters like Justice League. It is not going to make money. I don't care what any leak says or anything about it. It's not going to make money. They cost at least $300 million to make. At least 20% of it was reshot. The marketing alone was $150 worldwide, maybe even probably higher. It's not gonna make a ton of cash. Does it break even? Maybe. Is it gonna make $100 million in profit? We'll see what Deadline says later this year. It's possible. I mean, Batman vs Superman was a disaster, and it still made $100 million profit. So maybe it can leg it out to that. I don't know. I love how I just switched my entire perspective. It was like, there's no way it's going to make money. It's like, oh, maybe it makes $100 million. But, if you view it within context, it's a huge, massive failure for Warner Brothers and for the DCEU. And they're going to need to rebuild that entire movie series or entire cinematic universe because it's just not working right now. Coming up next is Dunkirk at number 12. Did 188, opened up in July this year. From Christopher Nolan, really good performance. This one definitely felt like a bet. Slow World War II movie coming out in July. But it's Christopher Nolan. I feel like people just respect Christopher Nolan as an artist and will go to see his movies because they're always interesting. And it turned out to be a very fascinating, almost experimental film, especially the way he plays with time. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that before. And maybe we should expect that. He did do Memento. That was his calling card early in his career. Which is one of the most fascinating time-bending movies I've ever seen. But a really strong performance from Dunkirk. And we'll see, I don't know if it got nominated for Oscar Best Picture or not. I think he did get nominated for Best Director, which he could win because it was a really good film. But strong performance for Dunkirk. Number 13 was Coco. Really strong performance for Coco. I thought it was going to go a little bit higher than what it did. A very big international film. Did about $660 million worldwide for Coco. I can see if that's like bigger or smaller than Moana. I'm not really sure. I have to check now. I don't know. I thought it was kind of the quality of Coco is super, super high. And that was surprising to me how well critics loved it and the audience response was ecstatic for it. And so because of that, I thought it was going to go do better. Leading up to it, before the reviews came in, it was like, it's kind of a hard play for North American audiences. Sure, in Mexico, in Latin America, it's going to play well. But the United States and places like Omaha, like how was it going to do? It turned out it did just fine. Massively beat out movies like Ferdinand. I'm kind of going through The Star, also came out this fall. Beat the Lego Ninjago movie. This did not beat Despicable Me 3, obviously. Did beat Cars 3. That's a big win. Like, Cars 3 definitely underperformed. But if you went into this year saying Coco's going to beat out Cars 3, you'd be like, I don't know about that. Beat out Boss Baby, which will come up soon. It did not. I thought it was going to match Moana once those reviews came in. That's what I was popping into my head. And it did not. Had similar openings in the same range, but the $50 million mark. Moana had a little bit more staying power than Coco. But I think artistically and creatively, it sort of marks a new phase for Pixar. It's like they're back to making these amazing, amazing films. Okay, so that was 13. Number 14 was a Lego Batman movie. Did 175. I think a little bit below expectations for this one. I think they wanted it to reach $200 million. You're matching Lego with Batman, these two huge brands together there. The Lego movie already did fantastic. This one sort of played okay, and then obviously there's a problem with this series because a Lego Ninjago movie flopped massively this fall. So they need to go back to the drawing board. Warner Brothers does, and think, do we need any more side Lego movie films? I think they just stick to the main series and they'll be fine. They'll print money if they do that. If they keep trying to push down these side movies, it's going to hurt the overall brand and tarnish it a bit. Number 15 was Get Out. We talked about that one before. 175 marks sort of the crossover now of the artistic renaissance of horror films into the financial boom of horror films. Kind of Get Out is really that crossover movie that has one foot on each world. I don't know what that really means for Universal and Blumhouse. Are they going to spend more than $5 million a film now? I don't think so. They have like 30 films coming out this year, and they all have a budget of like $3 billion. But Get Out, I think, is massive, huge for the horror film genre, just as much, I think, as It. Even though It made like double the amount of money, I think artistically Get Out was much more edgy and a lot more to say than It did. And I hope that gets studios to think more about using the horror film genre like it was back in the 70s as like political statements. Not necessarily political statements, but just like cultural studies or cultural statements. That's what horror, in my own personal opinion, that's when I think horror is the strongest, when it's making a statement. Night of the Living Dead, any George Romero film, any Wes Craven film, especially Nightmare and stuff like that. Like those were very strong statements about something going on in our culture. And I think that's where horror movies really shine, and Get Out was a perfect example of that. Number 16 was The Boss Baby, did 175 as well. I don't really want to talk about that movie. Came out in, was it March, end of March, had really great legs. I don't know why people went to go see this movie. I thought the trailer was really good, but it just looks so trashy. Like such a you compare The Boss Baby to Coco, and like Coco is this work of art that took years to make. Boss Baby looked like it took like 5 minutes to make. Like they just got a group of people in a studio together and maybe took like 6 months. Not a high quality film, but a high quality performance. Speaking of not a high quality film, number 17, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales. I don't even know, 172 for the year. I don't know if there's going to be another one. This one felt like it should have never come out. I'm not sure why they made it. I think it was like 6 years in the making or something like that. When was the last Pirates of the Caribbean movie? There's no demand for it. And when it opened around Memorial Day this year, no one really went to go see it. 172 is not a bad take, but it's terrible for a film that cost over $300 million to make. It's awful. So hopefully that series is dead. Technically number 18 was Jumanji. Already talked about it. Number 19 was Kong Skull Island from Warner Brothers. Came out in March this year. March was really kind of a blockbuster month this year. It's becoming like that now on the schedule. 168 for Kong Skull Island. An okay performance. I think they wanted this one to do a little bit more than that. But when it first opened, it looked kind of like, okay, where's this going to go? I don't even think it did a 3x multiplier. Let's double check at the opening weekend. Oh, did 61. So it had a pretty strong opening weekend. I lied. I take that back. Strong opening weekend. Didn't have a huge amount of staying power. It's not a great film. It's certainly an interesting film to watch. It has that excitement level to it, especially the first hour. The last hour is very boring. And very just sort of by the numbers action adventure movie. Didn't make a 3x multiplier, only did 168. I think Warner Brothers takes a look at this and says, all right, this was a cool experiment. You know, we thought we were going to do better than this with the stars that we had in there. John Goodman, Samuel L. Jackson, Brie Larson. But just did not really take off in the way they wanted it to. Number 20 for this year was Hidden Figures. Let's see. Did 167. This was a perfect example of an old school sort of word of mouth film. Opened up very slow, sort of trickled out to more theaters. Anybody who saw this movie immediately told everybody that they loved it. It was like the ultimate word of mouth film. It just stuck around for month after month after month. Then in this spring and last winter. 167 for that is a massive win for Fox. And, I hope they make more movies like that. And I don't just mean sort of the African-American sort of aspect of it, are telling those stories. I just mean like sort of adult drama films that are about something uplifting, right? We rarely have that. We have like the art house stuff and Sundance stuff, indie stuff, which is adult dramas, but they're very, very dark, and they're very, very, they're about drug abuse, alcoholism, depression, suicide, all this stuff. That's the art house world, right? Hidden Figures does not belong in that world, but it also is this film that doesn't belong with the comic book movies either. And this is the type of film that used to be made a lot before, I feel like 2005. There's a lot of these sort of PG-13, more adult focused films. And Hidden Figures is a perfect example of that. What can happen if it's done very well, it can make like, 10x its budget or something like that. So a huge win for Hidden Figures and Fox. That's the top 20. Let's see, we're kind of like 40 minutes in, something like that. Let's take a look at some other films and just sort of like some quick hits that I'm just going to pull out here, and then I'll take a big step back and we'll talk about the big picture. Cars 3 did okay. War for Planet of the Apes kind of flopped, to be honest with you. 146 total. Split, another example of the horror film genre. Although Split artistically was not great, I don't think. It certainly was riveting. But just the popularity of horror films now. 138 opened up in January 20th. Like, come on. That's fantastic. What a win for M. Night Shyamalan, too. But horror's back. I mean, that's the one thing you gotta realize. Horror is now a money-making genre. And not just in the gutter where it's making like $30 million total and turning a profit. Now we're talking well over $100 million for this film. Before this, you think about Scream, Conjuring, stuff like that, like the big films over the last 15, 20 years, the $100 million mark for a horror film was the mountaintop. Now they're blasting past that $100 million mark. And so it's a whole different ballgame for those types of films. Transformers flopped massively, did 130. Rogue One was a holdover from 2016. Wonder, a big surprise, 121 for the year. You could have easily seen that make $30 billion, right? And that would be expected. Kind of out of the blue, but that happens a lot with books, right? There's a whole book audience that you don't realize. There's a trailer for it, and it's coming out from Lionsgate, or like Twilight came out from Summit, and you're like, who are these people? Not realizing there's this huge, massive book audience behind it, and I think that's what carried Wonder forward here over the $100 million mark. Fantastic performance. La La Land was a holdover from 2016. So was Sing, I believe. Girls Trip. And one of the few examples of a rated R comedy being a big win. That genre has essentially collapsed over the last 4 or 5 years. Ever since the Hangover series sort of petered out with the third one, rated R comedies have had a real tough time doing well at the box office. Look at like Baywatch, look at The House, look at Rough Night this year, look at Fist Fight, just the Office Christmas Party last year. I could go on and on. There's so many different examples of these rated R comedies that just collapsed when they got to the box office. Girls Trip was one of those highlights of the genre, and suggests that there is still a space for those films to do well. You just have to make a good film that people actually want to go see. And if you do that, maybe they'll show up. They did for Girls Trip. Number 30 was 50 Shades Darker, 114. Not a great performance. I actually caught this one the other day. What a weird series of films and books. Started out as Twilight fan fiction and became one of the biggest sellers of all time. So strange. This movie's terrible. The leads don't look like they want to be in it at all. The new one's coming out here in about 2 weeks. I believe it is the final one of the series. This kind of feels like Maze Runner or whatever. Like, just end it. Like, nobody wants to go see these. Not even the fans of the books. Just end it now. 114 is not good at all for that movie. Baby Driver did 107. That was surprising. I saw that opening weekend. Edgar Wright finally gets his blockbuster. Edgar Wright is a director who's been around mostly since like 2004. Shaun of the Dead was his first debut film, which culturally is massive, but financially was not at all. Only made $13 million total in the United States, but ask any film nerd and they will quote that as one of their famous films. Same thing with Hot Fuzz, same thing with Scott Pilgrim. World's End, a little bit different. But now, finally, the most his film has ever done domestically in the United States and Canada was $31 million. Baby Driver does 107. So like I'm really excited for him because he's such a good director and such a good artist, and really supports his actors and the whole film production world. It's great to see people respond really well to Baby Driver. Let's see, 32, Annabelle Creation, 102, super surprising, right? So like just to like untangle the Blumhouse Conjuring cinematic universe, first you had The Conjuring, right? Then you had Conjuring 2. But even before you had Conjuring 2, I think you had Annabelle, right? Annabelle is a prequel to The Conjuring, I think. Yeah, prequel to The Conjuring. Annabelle Creation is the sequel to that prequel. So Annabelle Creation is a sequel to a prequel to The Conjuring. If that makes any sense. Does $100 million. I think it beat The Conjuring almost, or is level with The Conjuring. What's there to say? James Wan's a genius. Jason Blum is a genius. They've created this cinematic universe for horror films. Insidious, I kind of lump into that as well. The fourth one of Insidious just came out and did really well this year. We talked about the horror film renaissance, right? This is a sort of pillar of that, right? This is sort of what horror films have always been about. You shoot something for really low, you make it scary, you make it interesting, you get people to go opening weekend. That was the whole business model. That's what Annabelle Creation is all about. That's sort of the old school horror making world. It doesn't necessarily fit into these new Renaissance things that are going on artistically or financially. It's sort of the tried and true horror movie model, and I think Blumhouse has really taken it over, to be honest with you. So that's 32. I mean, I could go on and on. The one of the ones that stick out to me is sort of good or bad. Blade Runner 2049, I talked a little bit about. $91 million, really massive flop for that film, despite the fact that culturally speaking, from critics and from movie nerds, they loved it, like are ecstatic about it. 95% of the rest of the population didn't give a shit about that film whatsoever, and no one went to go see it. Emoji Movie somehow made $86 million. Power Rangers was kind of a bust at 85. The Mummy did 80. Really big flop for that. Kind of ended the dark universe, the whole monster Universal universe that Tom Cruise is sort of going to lead with this new film. That sort of ran into a brick wall, right? Speaking of running brick walls, Alien Covenant at 42 only did $74 million this year. Another huge bust. I don't think we're going to have another Alien film anytime soon. Bad Moms Christmas did 71, nowhere near what the original did. Baywatch was a huge flop at 58. Happy Death Day did really well, $55 million. And again, back to that's a Blumhouse Universal collaboration. That's the old school way of doing horror films. You make it for $5 million, it makes 55, and you make a nice big profit. Split, Get Out, It are a different model, right? They're massive blockbuster films now. Happy Death Day was not a huge blockbuster film. It was a small little horror film that opened up in October. Caught the Halloween audiences and just made some good money. But definitely the old model. Anything else to stick out here? The Dark Tower, stuff like that. I think that's mostly the big stuff. So before I sign off here for the in review part 2, we do need to take a step back and just talk a little bit about the broad strokes, right? Like Disney's massive, winning so well right now. They have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 of the top 7 films. Star Wars, Beauty and the Beast, Guardians, and Thor. I guess Spider-Man, Sony, but it feels like it's part of MCU. They're just super strong right now. They're buying Fox Studios, right? So they're going to become even more massive. You do kind of have to wonder if there's going to be antitrust situations that are pop up. They're so big and so successful. They have so much power. The moment they open in that streaming service and go against Netflix, I get the feeling some of the Democrats in the Congress are going to be like, this doesn't seem too kosher to me. So Disney is massive and huge. They're doing a great job. Women have never been stronger at the box office. The top 3 films have women leads. Patty Patty Jenkins directed Wonder Woman, did $400 million, biggest take ever from a female director. So that is going to continue on. It's going to be even more pointed, I think, just because of the Me Too movement really started later this, I guess it was late summer, early fall, I want to say. So but that stuff won't take effect probably for 2 to 3 years from now. And so in 2 to 3 years, I think I'm going to see another wave of female led films and female directed films and female produced films coming out. So I think that's going to be a huge movement over the next few years. As I mentioned, comic book movies are super strong. We had a lot of them this year, and they, for the most part, besides Justice League, all did very well. We have a lot more next year. I expect this year, I expect most of them to do pretty well. But once that Avenger movies comes out, I feel like we're in a little bit of a lull, or sort of like, what's next for comic book movies? Because I think that's sort of the ending of a whole chapter that started in 2012, 6 years ago, that really brought comic book movies to this sort of stratosphere level. We've never seen anything like it before in the modern box office. The way this genre is just printing money hand over fist. And it seems like there's no end to it. There's no ceiling. There's no limit to how well they can do. They really broke through all these records, right? But I do think once we get past that upcoming Avengers film, it's going to be a fork in the road. Like, which way is it going to go? But for all intents and purposes, it's never been stronger. Massive year for comic book movies. And then, I talked a lot about the horror film stuff. I think over the next 4 to 5 years, you're going to have 3 different paths of horror films. You're going to have the artistic path, which is what A24 is mostly focused on, I would say. And movies like that, or companies like that. And that would be, I mentioned It Follows, The Witch, which is A24. Also at A24, It Comes at Night was a good example of a throwback artistic horror film from this year. That's going to continue on all the way through the next few years. And I think it's always going to be around, but I think we're going to get some really classic horror films coming out in the next 2 years. That really will define a whole new part or phase of that genre. A lot of them are throwbacks to like the golden age in the 1970s. So you have that, and then you have the tried and true model, the Blumhouse model: shoot for super cheap, make $50 million, the Happy Death Day, and everybody's happy. And then we have this new phase. So those two phases have kind of always been around, or those two levels always around. The brand new one is the It level, the Get Out level, the Split level, where it's breaking through $100 million total take. It broke through $300 million, which I don't think has never been done before for a true horror film. So I think we're going to see massive big budgets for horror films moving forward. I think it's going to be awesome. I think it's going to be interesting. We'll see how long it lasts, because what usually happens is something does really well, creates all these copycats, and the copycats fail, and then the whole genre moves back to what it was before, right? We'll see how It 2 does. It's not coming out this year. I think it's coming out 2019. But I expect to see 1 or 2 massive horror films come out this year. Maybe Meg will be an example. Coming out in August, kind of a takeoff of Jaws. Prehistoric Shark is massive. So we'll see how they do, but I think we will see horror films with a much bigger budgets and a much bigger marketing budget as well. And I think the only other thing that I sort of mentioned and talked about that I want to bring up again is the rated R comedy situation. And that is, that genre died. It died so suddenly in the last 3 years that it was cool to see Girls Trip do well this year and say, hey, look, there's still a way to make a rated R comedy successful and interesting to audiences. But that was offset by probably 10 to 12 flops in that genre. And I don't know why that's necessarily happening, because I came up in my 20s. That's when rated R comedies really popped off, starting with around Old School in 2003. That was a whole boom of rated R comedies. And once we got to the hangovers and started to come down, and that's where we're at now, is in this real valley. And you have to wonder, like, are rated R comedies going to go to the way of rom-coms, which is completely die off? Rom-coms really, essentially, outside of The Big Sick, which is like an indie rom-com, are gone. They don't really get made anymore. They don't make any money. Compare that to 10, 15 years ago, and it's night and day. Are rated R comedies going to go the rom-com path, or are they just sort of in a little lull, and then a new phase of young comedians will come out? Like maybe like think about like Seth Rogen and Judd Apatow was not that young, but he was part of that whole crew. Steve Carell, the Groundlings people, like those improv folks. There needs to be another phase of that to really revitalize the rated R genre. Because if it doesn't happen, it's going to go the way of rom-coms. There just has to be a group of artists that come together and make really funny films that are for adults. But that's not set in stone, and that's going to happen. I mean, like a lot of the times people think that like culture is just this cycle where things will come back, but that's not true at all. Like it takes people actually making great, interesting art or products, however you want to view it, for things to become popular and to have cultural significance. And if those people don't produce that stuff, it's not going to happen. My guess is that it's going to go the way of rom-coms, and we're not going to see a lot of rated R comedies anymore. That's just sort of my read on it. Okay, so I think I've gone on long enough. So 2017 was a really interesting year. You know, the comic book movie stuff is just, they're so strong and they're surging, and they kind of suffocate the entire marketplace. It's hard to talk about the box office without constantly talking about comic book movies. I wish there were more movies like Hidden Figures or La La Land that were coming out, or Dunkirk would be another good example. I believe Dunkirk was like the only the only original movie in like the top 15 or something like that. Everything is a sequel or an IP reboot, whatever you want to call it. I hope there's more space for films like that, but I'm not that optimistic about it. Comic book movies and making movies off of known intellectual property like The Dark Tower or something like that, or It, that's what's doing really well. And they don't always do well, but those are the biggest films, are stories about stories we already know, essentially. And that's unfortunate, because I think there is a space for movies like Dunkirk and like Hidden Figures to come out and do well. It's just that these other films and the other style prints money for the most part, and that's what studios see. And these are large bets they make. Like if you make a movie for $100 million, you better hope it does $500 million worldwide. And that's a hard thing to say for a movie like Hidden Figures or Dunkirk. Like those are massive bets. And so we'll see if it happens. I'm not holding my breath on that, but I think we're going to see next year a very similar pattern. Lots of comic book movies, maybe some bigger horror films. Disney will win again, probably. But maybe we'll see some smaller adult films sort of trickle through and do well. We'll see. You know, I'm trying to think back to like The Fugitive or like Silence of the Lambs. Like, where are those films, you know, these days? I guess It counts, not really. But I think the culture has changed massively, a lot. And I think the people who are going to movies has changed. And I think the business has changed. And those types of films might be better, or probably viewed on TV as a TV show. Or they're viewed on Netflix or something like that. So we'll see. We'll see if the box office continues to become a tale of two cities, where you have art house and you have popcorn, and that's it. And there's nothing in between. And that's what it's become. It's a very sort of hierarchical, sort of huge gulf in the middle for films that are not quite super like Phantom Thread and not quite Star Wars The Last Jedi. Like, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of middle ground. But we'll see. Thanks for listening, guys. This is the Wildline Podcast. Actually, we'll be back soon to talk about the weekend update. All right. Thanks a lot.